Hi, I'm Chris. This is Finding God at Work. Just a reminder that Finding God at Work isn't just a podcast, it's also an online course. Check it out at findinggodatwork.org. Our current series is Meaningful Work: Calling, Formation, Service, and Love. Have you ever been sick and had to take medicine that just tasted awful? Or where like you're just like, oh, I can't believe I have to take this. But then like it worked and it was better. I hope if you've ever gone through this experience that it can serve as a kind of metaphor for eating humble pie. Humble pie does not taste great. It's really hard to eat humble pie. It's hard to admit that we're wrong. It's hard to revise our estimate of ourselves in a downwards direction. Think like, oh, I'm not as fill in the blank as I thought I was. Competent, fantastic, accomplished, as I thought I was. That's the bitter part of humble pie. But when you eat humble pie, when you humble yourself, to use the biblical language, it's really good for your soul. So humble pie tastes bitter, but it's so good for you. It's so good. It hits your tummy even, and you're like, oh, I needed that. That's good. That's good. So I want to talk about humility in the workplace, as we're talking about formation as part of the meaning of our work. Part of the meaning of our work is that it's a part of how God changes our hearts over time. It's part of how he crafts our character. Again, he's like working in a garage shop. You know, you can smell the cut wood and see the sawdust and, you know, the tools everywhere. And the project that God is working on is you. He's working on you. You're his garage shop project. And some of how he works on you is your work. And one way that work can help us is in growing in humility. Humility is one of the key Christian virtues. It's really interesting. If you study the history of how people thought about good and evil, vice and virtue, humility was not considered a virtue in the ancient world until Jesus showed up. It was Jesus who kind of gave this new vision of what it means to be good that included humbling yourself. And of course, he's the ultimate example of that he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross, as the Apostle Paul writes in Philippians chapter 2. So Jesus was humble, but he also gave this teaching on humility that to follow him, we can also be humble. And this transformed people's sense of what humility was. Rather than something to be avoided, it became seen rightly as a virtue. So Jesus transformed the way people think about this, even beyond the Jesus movement. Today, many people who are not necessarily Christians will still admire humble people and still aspire to be humble. Now, that depends. Not everybody. There's a bumper sticker on the car of one of my coworkers at my work that says, "Not aspiring to be humble." And I think it's a little bit of this cheeky sense of like, I got to stand up for myself. You know, I got to do stuff that matters. I'm not aspiring to be humble. But for those of us who are following Jesus, that's not a good bumper sticker for us. We are aspiring to be humble, but it's really hard to get there because if you're like me, you suffer from this thing that psychologists call the self-serving bias. So I just got out a page of an encyclopedia here, the International Encyclopedia of the Social Sciences. Here's what it says about this thing called the self-serving bias. A self-serving bias is any cognitive or perceptual process that is distorted by the need to maintain and enhance self-esteem. Okay, a lot of words there, but any cognitive or perceptual process. So that means any way that you're thinking or any way that you see things. So any way you think about something or any way that you perceive a certain situation, thinking and seeing, that is distorted. Okay, so you think wrongly or you see wrongly. Your vision and your thinking are distorted. They're out of whack, like a funhouse mirror, by the need, aka our need, to maintain and enhance self-esteem. We want to think that we're great. And this is true socially, right? Like, I love to be loved, I like to be liked, I hate to be hated. It's also true in terms of our self-concept around our work. I want to believe that I'm an amazing worker. And so in my role at the food bank, I'm a fundraiser. And I want to think that I'm just the best fundraiser there is and that, you know, I'm just hitting it out of the park. And then I look at my numbers some months and I'm like, well, I'm I'm a good fundraiser, but like, I'm not the world's best fundraiser. You need something to kind of check that bias that you have to inflate your own performance. Now, different people struggle in different ways. Some people struggle from negative self-talk, from thinking that they're worse than they actually are. And that can have different causes and reasons for that. But a lot of us, we fall into thinking that we're so great. We're all that. That's definitely my tendency. I want to read a little bit more of this encyclopedia article. It says, self-serving biases are particularly evident when individuals formulate attributions about the causes of personal actions, events, and outcomes. When explaining positive actions and experiences, their attributions emphasize the causal impact of internal dispositional causes. But when identifying the causes of negative events, they stress external situational factors. Okay, again, a lot of words. But what this means is, why did you succeed or why did you fail? So let's say you had a work project and you were helping lead the work project, maybe launching a new software platform or something. And it went amazingly well. You succeeded. Your team succeeded. What does the self-serving bias do? The self-serving bias means when you're asking the question, why did we succeed? You're going to tend to answer that by looking inside of yourself, right? Emphasizing the causal impact of internal dispositional causes. So it's like, we succeeded because we worked so hard. We succeeded because we're smart. We succeeded because we have the best strategy. Okay, a few months later, let's say you try and launch another software platform and it fails. It goes miserably. Now you have to explain, why did we fail? And what do? Well, you tend to emphasize or to stress external situational factors. So you say, well, it was the economic situation. The economy, we don't have any control over the big economic context in which we operate. And that shifted, and so that's what affected the software rollout. The demand that we thought would be there wasn't there. Or you could say, also we had this change in leadership in the C-suite of our company, even though our team is not at that level. There was a lot of kind of chaos in people's expectations about what might happen in the direction of the company overall, and so it wasn't really our team's fault that the way that affected everything. So you see what happens, right? When you succeed, you take credit. But when you fail, you blame your circumstances. This is one manifestation of the self-serving bias. And I fall into this all the time. I feel like I'm a super competent individual, so I'm not surprised when I succeed, and I'm happy to take credit for it. But when I fail, I want to evade responsibility. And so how do we overcome this self-serving bias? It's very common for human beings. If humility is something that Jesus is leading us into, how do we enter into humility intentionally? How do we eat our humble pie? Well, one thing that can be helpful is failure itself. The experience of failure can be instructive for us. And I want to go to Deuteronomy chapter 8, where it talks about success, but then also think about how the inverse of it can teach us. So Deuteronomy, just by way of review, is the final book of the 5 books of the Torah. It's when Moses is sort of giving his final address to the people of Israel. So he's kind of summarizing a lot of things that he said before and giving them warnings about what comes next. So what comes next in the story is the people are entering into the promised land. And this comes from Deuteronomy chapter 8, starting in verse 11, where he's kind of warning them about what to expect in the promised land. Moses says, "Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart will be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness, with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, who brought you water out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you to do you good in the end. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers, as it is this day." Okay, Now, you see that embedded in that warning, Moses kind of did a little recap of all the things God had done for the people of Israel. He brought them out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. He led them through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions. He provided for them water, even though it was thirsty ground, a dry land with no water. He provided them with manna, this kind of miraculous bread that appeared from heaven to feed the people in the wilderness when they couldn't farm or do anything like that. And why did he do all these things? Why did God do all these things? This is in verse 16. He said that he might humble you and test you to do you good in the end. The people of Israel had to go through this long journey where they were not competent. They could not produce crops for themselves. They could not produce wealth for themselves. They were just totally dependent on God's provision for them. And what did God do? He provided for them. He provided for them with miracle after miracle. The original miracle of deliverance from Egypt in the 10 plagues and the parting of the Red Sea. But then these continued miracles of provision, this water from the rock, this manna from heaven. God continues to provide. Why does he do it? To humble them and test them, to do them good in the end. God wants them to realize, oh, God is the source of everything that's good for us. And he wants to test them to see, are you willing to trust me? Are you willing to depend on me for everything you need? Israel, plot spoiler here, they fail that test a lot of the time. As do we. We so often think, I'm in charge, I'm competent, I've got this figured out. And we forget that the real source of any kind of success or wealth that we have is God. And this can refer to literal wealth, right? And this is verse 18. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth. So literally, whatever's in your bank account, that's there by God's grace. That's literally true of the money you have. But it's also true of other forms of success. So when a work project really goes well, when that software deployment is on track and smooth and sales are going and everybody's happy, right? Who gave you the power to do that? That wasn't just you, that was the Lord. So in theological context, we might call the self-serving bias the God-forgetting bias, right? It's not just that we take credit for something internally when we're successful and then blame external factors when we fail. It's that we forget that even our internal stuff that may indeed have contributed to success, even that comes by God's grace. Inasmuch as we were smart or strategic or prepared or competent in any way, all of those are also gifts of God's grace for us. And this is why failure can be so instructive. What did God do before leading his people into the promised land? He put them in this situation where they couldn't really provide for themselves, and he provided for them. It was almost like a situation of failure for the people. And it was a situation of failure in the sense that it was their hardness of heart that led to God needing to do that for them. But when we face failure at work, again, not necessarily like a moral failure of hardness of heart, that can be an instructive opportunity for us. So I want to share an example of this in my work life back when I was at the mortgage company several years ago. I had been working as the executive assistant to the president of the company, and then he had a project leader resign. And so he wanted somebody to take over as that project leader, and he thought, maybe, Chris, you could do this. So he came to me. It was an area I didn't really have any experience. It had to do with how to design our website to generate leads for our loan officers. So basically people searching for mortgages online, how could we get their information so that salespeople could get in touch with them? So like forms on our website and ads and things like that. I had no experience in this area. And Kevin knew that, my boss. But Kevin said, Chris, I think you could figure it out and I'll be there to support you. And so I was encouraged by his confidence. And again, I feel like I'm a competent person. So I'm like, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. I got in there and I could not figure it out. The data side of it, like trying to track all the data in our systems of like how we were following confidentiality things to honor client data, even while we were getting new information on new clients. But then like also how do we track that in our system to keep track of like, oh, this loan was from one of those leads that we generated way back when on our website, and making sure it tracked through the system. That was super confusing for me. And I was working with our data team, but it took me a long time to try and figure that out. And I had these Excel spreadsheets that were like thousands of rows long. And I was like, I don't have any background in data. Why am I the person trying to figure this out? And then also just like the inflow, outflow of cash. We were spending money on these ads, but we weren't generating that many leads. So we were bleeding money every month. And so I was looking at the monthly budget, and every month we had a meeting with me and Kevin and the CEO, because it was a CEO president kind of dual company. And I present the numbers of how much money we had lost that month. And it's not that Kevin and the CEO were breathing down my neck, but I just felt bad about it. I was like, I can't figure out how to make this thing work. Like, I don't have the right model here. And so we would go and do research, and Kevin would help me. And at no point did Kevin say, Chris, you're failing. But I was failing. At least that was my assessment of myself. After 4 months of this, of kind of spinning my wheels, not seeing a way forward, I went in and I asked Kevin for a demotion. And finding yourself in the position to ask for a demotion, that's eating some humble pie. That was a tough conversation, right? I kind of felt embarrassed. The humble pie was bitter. Kevin tried to talk me out of it. He was like, you can figure this out. You can hang in there. And I was like, no, I can't. And I think I made the right call in that situation, because then they moved me to a different role at the company. I did much better in that role. I was training, kind of leaning into my teaching gifts and what my wheelhouse really is, rather than all the stuff that I had no experience with and not very strong intuition about how to figure it out. But that was still really hard to eat that humble pie. But man, was it good once I ate it. Again, it went down into my tummy, and it was so sweet and good and strengthened, because it was just the truth. It was just acknowledging the truth about what I'm good at and what I'm bad at, and saying, this is not it for me. I should not be put in charge of a website that's generating leads for a mortgage company. That's not the right fit for Chris Easley. And there's just an incredible freedom in being able to say that without shame, and even with a little bit of shame maybe, but then, you get through it and it's okay. And that ministered to me. And what's the deeper reality there? Again, remembering that if the self-serving bias is kind of the God-forgetting bias, is this idea that I somehow need to be omnicompetent. I need to be great at everything, right? And what I learned through the experience of failure is, there's something that I'm not great at. There's something that I fail at when I try to do it. And that's a little moment of self-discovery about how God made me. God did not make me to be somebody who can generate tons of website leads, as best we can tell. And that's okay. If I remember, who's the one that gives the power for success? That's God. And okay, so I didn't succeed here. Again, this isn't always the right takeaway, but it's maybe I'm not operating in the zone where God would have me operate. And it's okay. So God's the one that gives us power to produce wealth. God's the one that gives us power to succeed. When we fail, we sometimes see insights about ourselves and about what God intends for us to do in our work. Again, not always. Sometimes you fail, and maybe it really was external factors. Maybe it's not that God wants you to do something different. It's just sometimes you fail and get up and try again. But having that humility to say, I don't have to be good at everything, and having that openness to learn what God might have for you specifically, that helps form the character of humility in you. That helps you step into your next work project, whatever it is, with a sense of, I might not be the best at this. And in as much as I succeed at this, it might be because of God's grace working in me and maybe factors beyond my control. I don't have to take credit for everything that's good, and I don't have to blame everything that's bad on someone else. I can just accept myself as I am, with honesty, with humility. So failure can be instructive in helping us grow in humility. A prayer that I learned, I mentioned the author Leanne Payne, kind of a deep cut, not very well known in our last episode. A prayer that I learned from her was, Lord, let me never have more success than my character can handle. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's kind of the way I internalized what she wrote in one of her books. It's a prayer for humility. Lord, let me never have more success than my character can handle. It's a very un-American prayer in the sense that it's not pursuing as much success as possible at all times. It's rather saying, am I ready for this success? Am I humble enough to entertain this success in a good way? It's a good question to ask. So if you're in a situation where you're succeeding, don't indulge in the God-forgetting bias. Remember, that's God's grace in you. And if you're in a situation where you're failing, maybe it's an opportunity to eat some really healthy, wholesome, humble pie. Lord Jesus, thank you that you are our model of humility, that you humbled yourself, that you're leading us into a path you've already tread of seeing the truth about human limitation and about who we are and who you are. Help us to not take credit for those things that are really gifts of your grace, Help us to have the courage to humble ourselves under your mighty hand. Jesus, do your work in us as we do our work with you. Amen.
Thanks for listening. Finding God at Work is a production of Mission Central, a ministry based in Aurora, Illinois, dedicated to forming Christians for mission in everyday life. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to this episode to get 10 minutes of teaching on faith and work every Tuesday and Thursday. To get resources to go deeper with each podcast series, read our blog, and get info about upcoming courses on faith in the workplace, go to our website, missioncentral.church.